Hello, everybody. This is November 23rd, and this is an upstream meeting focused on filling out some of the issues that are going to help us implement milestone 1 of the OLM V1 project. So if you look at our other recordings, you'll see that we define the first milestone, which is effectively encompassed by the user story that focuses as the cluster admin. I can install and uninstall an extension through the operator API from a list of available extensions on the cluster. And if you have an opportunity, please just take a moment to look through the description of the milestone. And after a minute or two, we'll start generating the user stories. Okay, so Bryce Palmer raised a question: in the list of things that are used to install and uninstall an operator, should we include the catalog source API? So are you referencing the old catalog source API or the new catalog source API?
I'm referencing more the new one. I know Anik has been working on some of that stuff. I don't think he's in the call right now. But
Okay.
I know he's got like a design doc or something like that that he's going to be putting out for review. So just wasn't sure if we wanted to include that because the user story does mention from a list of available extensions on cluster. And I know we talked about in the meeting yesterday, potentially including catalog source in this milestone.
So
I don't think it's.
Catherine, you can go.
I don't know that it's critical for that to be in place for milestone 1. Like, I think if we want to keep this like really, really small scoped, that we can probably get away with just using the existing catalog sources. I think the pieces that we'll definitely need are the adapters that Ankita's been working on. And that kind of has pieces on both sides, like sort of the DEPI side as well as the catalog source side.
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with Catherine. It inflates the scope of milestone 1 without adding like a huge amount of benefit, in my opinion. I think we should definitely be working on like we should give Anik attention when he releases that document that showcases the proposal for the new catalog source API, right? Like that has to start getting traction. But I don't think it necessarily needs to block our first milestone, simply because we don't need another potential thing blocking us. And ideally, as that doesn't prevent Anik from creating the new catalog source API and then writing a DEPI source adapter, which should generically just plug into the solution we're developing, right?
Cool. That sounds good to me. I just wanted to double check and verify.
Yeah, so I think it's like one of those things that if it's done, it should just integrate, and then it's a free win, and then we just have to promote it somewhere. And if it's not done by Milestone 1, it seems like a good target for Milestone 2. Or a potential one, at least. Okay, and then scenario 4. Delete the cockroach DB and Prometheus operators from the cluster, show that the underlying bundle contents are fully cleaned up. Austin, you asked if an operator is uninstalled, should the bundle be deleted or just the bundle deployment? I don't know. I think we have to define that user experience. And what do you guys think?
I think we have an open question around that in one of our many open question compilations. And that one feels like there's definitely a lot of like complex pieces to that. So my gut is to maybe just punt that conversation for now and like just schedule a meeting to talk about that in more detail next week. And just focus on the pieces that we do already know about it, then can write some stories for. But if people want to talk now, we can also do that.
Do we want to have made that decision as part of Milestone 1?
Yeah, I think a spike will probably be useful, right? To kind of define that user experience. And then, a follow-up would be to actually implement the experience that we define. So we'll remember that when we get around to creating that. But does anybody have any other questions about Milestone 1? Okay, cool. Well, so our first, actually just gonna make this screen really small and have it off to the side so we can look at this as we write the ticket. Okay, so do we want to go through, do we want to start generating tickets as like, like walking through the workflow, and then we can create tickets as, we'd run into them in the workflow?
That sounds nice to me.
Bryce, to answer your question, it does have a tilling service, but it only goes left and right as far as I know. And I wanted it horizontally so I could see the whole scenario down here.
Gotcha. Sorry, I didn't mean for that to distract. Just was curious.
Yeah, no issue. Okay, cool. So the first thing we need to do, so if a user's installing this, we could include discoverability, but I don't think we need to do we think we need to take on the discoverability story, i.e., the demo calls out installing cockroach DB and Prometheus operators. Technically, if that's the restraint, we don't need to be able to find them from a list of operators. We just have to like create the operator resource that would lead to those being installed. Do we think for the MVP we can just create the operator knowing that those two things exist, or do we need to do the discoverability story now?
Isn't discoverability a part of scenario 2?
So I'm talking about discoverability from the surface of the user, right? Or from the viewpoint of the user, i.e., I can do like OC get installable operators or something, and then that would list what operators could be installed. I had assumed that most of that was going to come from the catalog source API that Onyx was working on, i.e. the, like the content available within a catalog source is discoverable. And then we just use that to create these individual from that list, these two would be present. But if we don't want to like wait for that, it's pretty easy to just create an operator CI or CR for CockroachDB and Prometheus, and then see it get installed since we know they exist.
That sounds good to me. I think we ought to default to not including something in the milestone if we can get away with it at all.
Okay, Catherine and Per, any objections there?
Nah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Just I'll put that out of scope, and we can make it discoverable in different ways, even if it's cumbersome.
Okay, so that means we need to create a new issue, because this means that and I'm not sure how large I want to make this, but we effectively need the operators CRD to be implemented, right? That's, I can install an operator by creating an operator CR. So that's the story we want to.
Is it worth making the issues less general like that? Like maybe trying to be a little bit more specific in the actual work that we need to get done?
I think we should. So like, I'm trying to think, like, all I want to have is these operator CRD introduced to the cluster, and what that CRD has to let me do is say which package to install, right? That's like the bare minimum.
Yeah, so maybe like if we just say it that way, and then we can always maybe put the user story in the README if we want to like say it in that format.
Something like that. Or define
Yeah.
the operator CRD spec.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Joe mentioned that he would also like us to move towards like really, really small things that are really easy for people to do in like a day or two. And that way everything is like very narrowly scoped and well defined.
I'm just doing this freehand, so if anybody has any feedback, please feel free to speak up. So in terms of, so I think the individuals who have been working on DEPI might be able to provide a good amount of details here, but we basically have to have the operator API should allow users to specify. We're talking like the package name. We probably want to be able to specify the version. Is there?
Does it even?
I could imagine that being broken into multiple stories.
Okay, so I think we could actually just start with the package name. Do we need anything beyond that?
Nah, I don't think so.
You need to
channel.
The catalog.
And catalog, yeah.
I mean, I may even argue channel is something we.
Yeah, we can just take the default.
Especially if we want. Well, I was going to say we've had conversations about the possibility that channel becomes an optional property, right?
Right.
like in that world. I think we want to avoid that bit until we have some more opinions in that direction.
Right. And so typically, we'd say like the catalog source, this would be a DEPI source in this case, right?
I would still leave it as catalog source, to be honest. Like, I think this leaks, the underlying bits. Whereas catalog source, I think, is a more of a first class term. Or catalog, yeah.
Good question. Do we even need to specify the catalog? Does DEPI, if there are multiple entities that provide a package, would it find that?
It would be based on the order in which you have choices, if that makes sense. So if you have, so it just depends which catalog it hits first, let's say, if it's in multiple catalogs.
Okay. I think we could include the catalog then, just so that we have some determinism baked in. We probably want to consider whether or not we want, DEPI to like order entities, sources based on ID before retrieving, before ordering the list of possible entities. But it could be a different discussion. But this seems like a pretty scoped user story. It's basically a 2-spec CR. Maybe I think that's all we really need for the very first story, correct? Anything else we want to add here? So, Bryce, there is a way to specify priority of catalogs for the existing catalog sources, but I don't know that we've done that on the DEPI side yet. So, and that doesn't seem really needed for an MVP or for milestone 1, but it's probably something we'd want to do at some point.
Cool, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just going to update the comment. I'm going to save. Instead of defining it, I'm going to make this more loosely. So update the operator CRD spec to allow me to specify a package name and channel and operator I want to install.
Catalog, right, instead of channel.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, that's probably close enough. And then this is for the operator. Do we have github.com/operator framework/operator? Just a thing. Perfect. Look at that, guys. Convert to issue. And then we'd add OLM v1 dash. Have to go. Is there a color we want to? Ooh, what about green? That's fun. Anyone have a preferred color? Purple? I like purple.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
If you make it green, is that nepotism?
A little bit. Yeah, I usually use the handle like green giant in a lot of places. Just kind of funny. Oh, there we go. Look at that. OLMD1. And so this thing should now exist. Boom, guys, look at that. Our very first issue. It's pretty exciting. Okay, cool. We got one issue. Cool. So we've now installed, we've specified a operator CR that has a package and catalog. Is there, what happens next? So the operator would need to query, the operator controller would need to query the DEPI, what I refer to as like the DEPI service. What's the lingo there? The DEPI service.
I'm sorry.
So now that the operator CR exists, the operator controller needs to work with DEPI. So would it be like, in terms of the next issue, we need to like, the operator controller needs to query or send a request to the DEPI service, right?
Right. So at least to start with, I'll just embed DEPI into the operator controller, so that we can figure out how the framework is going to work properly and all of that, and then actually make a decision of where the resolver should reside afterwards. So the hope is that it should be easy enough to sort of box shift it somewhere else. And then what we would have to do is just, instead of calling the solver directly, just have the client and refactor that bit.
I see. Okay, but for our first step, we're saying just shoving DEPI
Yeah,
inside
just
the operator controller.
Let's embed the resolver inside the operator controller.
Okay, so what
So
does,
it might be worth noting in the ticket that it could be worth just putting it behind some sort of interface, so that when and if we want to pull it out, then we just have to re-implement that interface, and everything else stays happy.
okay. So so for the title of this, operator controller uses DEPI to resolve an operator CR, right? Or is resolve the correct word, or to find solutions for
Right.
an operator CR? Well, for existing operator CRs, that's probably the most apt description. Now, is this story too big? Should we break this into a bunch of little things? Because I guess where I'm asking for help. So I suppose what we could do is just focus on this story being like the process of embedding DEPI into the operator controller. And then we could start creating the tickets for DEPI that would actually enable us to do that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So there'll be a few different moving parts here. So one would be the connection to the DEPI source, so fleshing out the DEPI source and doing the binding to the catalog source. Then from that, we should have all of the entities. We're working now on the OLM constraint side, so we should at least have most of the work done there. So hopefully, if the framework is good enough, it should just be a matter of weaving these different bits together into the solver and calling it. So hopefully it shouldn't be too big. But I would start with this, and then when we want to go through a round of refinement, then we can, just size this, discuss it, size it. If it's too big, figure out how to break it.
Okay, so I'm going to just capture some of that. DEPI should be embedded in the controller, possibly behind an interface, so it can easily be moved to its own standalone service. That, what else does it need to do? The operator controller can identify when an operator CR cannot be fulfilled or satisfied, I guess is the right term. Anything else we want to add to this one?
Do we want to specify the type of output the controller operator needs?
So yeah, we probably want to do that. The output from, so quick question here, is this the way I had envisioned this? So skipping over all the stuff that we need to add in order for Defi to actually resolve these constraints, I had imagined that there'd be something returned, which the operator controller is able to process and then create bundles and bundle deployments.
Yeah, we just have to figure out what is the actual. So what the solver will do is tell you which, let's say, bundles are selected, right? So then we have to actually figure, which would give you a kind of, let's say, a reference in a way. And then we actually have to get the content itself. So I don't know, is the content like an image? Is it the bundle, deserialized version of the bundle entry with all of the bits?
Okay, so
like
these
properties and so on. Yeah.
I see. So these references will then be used by the operator controller to install, create, back bundle. So we're basically saying the format of the references needs to be determined as a part of this ticket. So what we're basically saying is that Rockpack is only going to know it's only going to be able to provide references to entities that actually fulfill the subscription. There's probably a step that needs to exist in order for the operator controller to receive the content that it's actually going to exist in the I don't bundle and bundle deployments, right? Like it has to then go and retrieve the content that needs to be created from the references. Is there a good way to phrase that?
So I think this is reasonable.
Update that.
Just one quick comment. Sorry, I'm totally late and maybe out of context, but the operator controller will only ever create bundle deployments, and RuckPack will go and create bundles on behalf of the bundle deployments. So just a little nit to that last bullet.
So it's only going to create the bundle deployments.
Is there, you may have already talked about this before I joined, but I think what's in scope, at least for milestone 1, is like satisfied is very loose for milestone 1, right? It's effectively like, can I find a bundle that has this package inversion? Like that's really all we care about for milestone 1. I don't know if we want to call that out specifically.
Yeah, so if you look at this first one, we actually landed on package name in the catalog we want to install from, just because there's no concept of catalog prioritization, and we wanted the results to be deterministic, and this seems like an okay avenue to do that. And within these two, we could default to the default channel and just take the head.
Why is there no catalog priority?
I just don't think it exists yet.
Well, it does in the catalog source API.
Right, but Deppy doesn't have that concept baked in yet.
Okay. All right, I might be taking us down a rabbit hole, but I guess I'm wondering if we think that catalog is always going to be in a field, whether it's optional or required. Maybe we don't care yet, and we're just like, whatever, like this is the thing that'll help us move along.
Well, I think if we wanted to, we could just make sure that the catalog available on cluster is limited, like just contains the 2 operators we want installed, and then you only need the package name if you wanted to do it that way. But
I guess I imagine that like catalog is just another constraint. I don't know if I'm oversimplifying, but like if you say you want a package and you don't say which catalog you want it from, then it's not deterministic. Just like when you say I depend on a certain GVK, you don't know which package is going to provide that. But if I'm like, again, like if I'm just taking us to a point where like it's not important right now, then just stop me.
I'm on the same page as you, Joe, but I think to start, just doing things as unambiguous as possible is probably easier. And then we can always like relax constraints as we go.
yeah, so I imagine both of these basically acting as constraints, right? Like that's how it's implemented in Deppy. And we could just
maybe my suggestion is that we can paper over the choose from the catalog, and like if it's going to be more work to like let us figure out which catalog is which, then maybe we just say like it is not deterministic for now. You tell us a package name, that's it. Like we'll just look at all the catalogs and sort by version and pick the highest version or something, right? Like I don't know if it matters that it's deterministic always from the get-go, but maybe that's open for debate. I'm looking for like the smallest possible operator API and the smallest possible Deppy complexity to like get us to the point where we can demonstrate milestone 1.
I'll let Per or Catherine speak to that.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat it, please?
I guess I'm wondering like, well, my premise is that like the best way to make progress is to make the smallest incremental changes. And in my mind, like the smallest incremental change for milestone 1 is an operator API that has the only field in there is package name. Like that's it. That's all you can do is just tell us, I want this package name. And the only thing that Deppy's gonna do is have some way to decide like, all right, I'm gonna look at all the catalogs and I'm gonna choose a bundle from that package name. And it honestly doesn't really matter what algorithm we decide we're gonna use for this milestone. We probably would say like sort them by Simber and pick the one at the top of the list. So I guess I'm arguing like, if that's what we want to do, then can we get rid of the catalog specification on the operator API, make that tighter scope to just package name, and have Deppy just automatically decide hard code what its algorithm is for choosing from multiple catalogs.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Or is it easy?
honest.
Like if you say like, oh no, it's easier just to like have the thing tell us which catalog, then like maybe that's fine too. But I'm hesitant to say like, okay, let's go ahead and put something in the operator API and then start depending on that in certain places. And then we have to back that out later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. It's easier to add than to refactor.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure based on the one code review I've done on Deppy that it would just default to the first catalog source it finds that has that package name constraint satisfied.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we limit the number of catalog sources to one, it's always going to be deterministic, which is nice, but shouldn't be too hard to do. So anyways, we'll just include package name. Boom. This one needs to be converted to an issue. It needs to be assigned to the operator controller. It needs to be labeled to OLM B1 milestone 1. Just want to make sure that we're all basically cleared on this. All we're saying is that we need to embed Deppy into this controller so that it can solve a set of operator CRs. And acceptance criteria just basically identify when an operator can be satisfied or when it cannot be satisfied.
Perfect.
I've got one more follow-up, which is like, do we think this issue is small enough? Like when I look at this, and Per and Catherine, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but when I look at this, I'm like, oh man, that sounds like a bunch of work. But I don't know how far along Deppy is, so you can tell me like, oh no, like this is just plugging in a few of the library components together and we're done.
So just to preface this, and maybe we need to improve it, I was hoping that we would identify what work needs to happen on the Deppy side of things and then track that work as a part of Deppy in issues. And then this would be a follow-up once Deppy's in a place to do, like resolve constraints. Then you would add this into, take that version of Deppy and embed that in the operator controller.
I feel like we should be able to track the Deppy stuff here too, though. Not necessarily in this issue, but like on this project.
Yeah. So we would be creating the issues against the actual steps that. So Deppy is in a state right now. I was hoping to create a series of issues that get Deppy to the state where it can be given a set of package names that it needs to satisfy from entities, and then give out a list of things that satisfy it. And each of the steps we need to do in order to do that would be tracked as issues in this board and would exist in the Deppy project and labeled with the OLM V1 milestone 1.
That sounds good to me. I did play around with GitHub issues a little bit, and there's a feature that I think is new where if we were to reference all of those Deppy issues in this issue, when they get merged, they will get checked off of the list here. So we could kind of set up that as a blocking relationship, but also track those Deppy issues in the milestone.
Sounds good. But is everyone okay with that? Like I just wanted to get get this thing up so that we state that the operator controller needs to use Deppy, and then we need to generate all the issues that Deppy needs to do so it can be used by the operator controller.
Yeah, no, I think this is fine. We'll definitely have to break this down into smaller chunks, especially so we can be a little bit more efficient with the development. But this is a great start. So what I would probably suggest is that we queue this up for refinement, maybe for the next session or something like that, or maybe Catherine and I can come together and make a proposal that we can share here, and then we can iterate on that together.
Cool. So should we do we want to start filling out one or two of those items now? Like,
so just so we don't get lost in the weeds, what I would suggest is that we, stay at the top level.
okay,
And then once we're done with that, then we go to the next level down. So
that sounds good to me.
breadth first.
Okay, cool. So we'll make the next ticket and we're going to create a draft. So the operator controller can take a DEFI solution and so Joe, you had mentioned that the operator controller gets, so logically the next step is, okay, so the operator controller has used DEFI to resolve a list of entity references. What is the next step?
So each of those entities will have a blob of metadata that we got from the catalog associated with it, one of which will be the image, the bundle image field. So at a high level, I imagine that the next step is basically look up each of those entity IDs to get the image for them, and then create, or really we're not necessarily creating, we're just reconciling and ensuring that bundle deployments exist for each of those, right? So at any given point, we either need to create a new bundle deployment because it doesn't exist yet, or we're just going to re-update it to make sure that it aligns with what DEPI is telling us right now should exist.
This barely for our user story as the operator controller. We'll clean this up later. But so basically, as the operator controller, I can take the set of entity references provided by DEPI as a solution and resolve each reference to a bundle in a particular catalog. We'll say catalog for now.
So I would probably drop in a particular catalog, because at the point that the operator controller is looking at this, the catalog is irrelevant. Like we've just got like an entity that says like, here's my bundle image. And so RuckPack is just going to be like, great, like I'll make sure that bundle image is running. So the catalog is like completely out of the picture on the operator controller side. Really, DEPI abstracts that catalog concept away.
Okay, so we're saying that so I think we had this discussion before you were here, but I don't think we had decided what the solution set returned by DEPI looks like, whether or not it's the bundle image or something else. But what you're proposing is that the solution set does include the bundle image, and then the operator controller takes over from there, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably an implementation detail exactly of like what DEPI returns. So there's two ways to do it, right? Either DEPI returns like everything you need, or DEPI says like, here's the IDs that you need, and then the operator controller uses some other API to look up those IDs. But either way, at the end of whatever that process is, the operator controller has the bundle images that would be needed to represent those entity IDs that DEPI said are part of the solution.
So then is the last part of that sentence, and resolve each reference to a particular bundle with B being capital as in the CRD of DEPI?
It essentially, like what we're essentially going to do is like get those bundle images and then make sure that there is a bundle deployment for each of those bundle images. And there's another little nuance here, which is like, how do I know if that bundle image is something that I should change from an existing bundle deployment or whether it should be a new bundle deployment? So we'll have to think about that. Like the most obvious answer is, well, look up the package name for that bundle. And then that's the name we use for the bundle deployment. And then that way, like, you know, whether it's a new bundle deployment because it's a new package name or it's an existing bundle deployment because it's just a different bundle image for that existing package that you have. That makes sense?
Yeah, can we talk about this when we get to that point in the process? Because I think just stopping this one at resolving it to the bundle images is probably small enough. And then the next one could be getting the bundle image into the bundle CR.
Totally. That makes sense to me. Yep.
And then Anik, I know you were going to say something. So if you want to talk in the background while I write up this thing, or if you want to hold it for when we get to that point, that's fine too.
No, that was the thing that I wanted to mention.
So, okay, so the acceptance criteria. So we probably have to surface errors when the bundle image, when a reference provided by DEPI is unreachable, right? Ooh.
That one is full of interesting issues and problems to solve. But I agree with it.
And then the operator poll. So I'm just saying polling, right? Like I'm just saying like the content inside that bundle is made available to, that bundle image is now available to do a thing with. Is there better wording or could this be better scoped down?
I think we're delegating that all of that to RuckPack. So from the operator controller's perspective, it never does any bundle image pulling. It's just going to go and create some other objects. Yeah. Although based on your user story, I would probably say that like, I don't know, like it's hard to prove the user story because like we're probably gonna like take those resolved bundle images and then go create the RuckPack stuff from them. But it sounded like you wanted to put that RuckPack side of things in a new story, which makes sense. Like we're gonna have to do both of those things, and it seems like a point that you can cut. But acceptance criteria seems like the operator controller knows the bundle images that it needs to create bundle deployments for, or something like that.
Yeah, but it like has a list of bundle images it needs to resolve. It's like kind of a catch-all word, but we're basically
trying to needs to deploy, reconcile, manage, something like that.
I have a suggestion in the chat if we are not already being overloaded with suggestions. The operator controller can utilize the content of the bundle image. Sounds vague enough for the time being.
I don't know. I don't like the saying content. I mean, I think we all are saying the same thing, but the operator controller is never going to know about the content of the bundle image directly. I don't think. So I would say it can utilize the bundle image reference or something like that, maybe.
Operator controller creates an array of bundle images it needs to process. Like that's.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine, honestly. And if
I mean,
one person works on this and says like, hey, here's my PR, and I've got some debug code that prints out the list of bundle images that resolve from DEPI, and the other person says, all right, I've got some code that takes a list of bundle images and applies it to some RuckPack deployments, then I think we're in a good spot, right?
So
Yeah.
the one caveat I would add to that maybe is bundle properties, right? Like stuff that we care about eventually for resolution might be stuff we want to be able to pull out and be aware of at the operator controller layer.
Yeah,
So, but does that, those bundle properties exist on the bundle image, correct?
So ideally, that's actually just bits that we get out of the FBC, right?
well,
All the
from
properties
the
should be
operator
there.
controller's perspective, it is something that comes out of the DEPI entity API.
Right, right, yeah.
So basically, Kevin, are you saying the operator controller is able to look up? I mean, it seems like the more general
It's like it should.
criteria is that the operator controller is able to look up all of the information related to that bundle that DEPI knows about, or that came from the catalog. or
Yeah,
something.
what I'm saying is that I think it's gonna be really important for, if we're not gonna have another API that exposes the resolution itself, something has got to expose, here's all the properties that we're using to make decisions about what we are and aren't resolving. So you can ask questions about why.
It seems like it should happen at this layer, like where DEPI, like it's providing a list of references of bundles that were selected. It seems like the properties should be included in this.
But the bundles, see, but the properties are on the bundles out of necessity, because there wasn't another place for that data to be, not because those properties being attached to the bundle images themselves is necessarily the right thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
ideally,
And DEPI doesn't dictate that, right? Like DEPI just says like, give me some metadata,
right.
however you want to give it to me. And all, like, you can attach whatever properties you want to whatever bundle images you want from DEPI's perspective, right? Like, it doesn't matter where that came from or how it was sent to DEPI.
Right.
I don't know though, like, I kind of imagine, Kevin, that like, maybe that's out of scope for this milestone.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I just think that that's gonna have to happen like really quickly afterwards, because
Well, the
how
reason,
do I figure out what how do I figure out what was or wasn't installed and why is like a really, I think, fundamental part of trying to install something.
well, I would have, so if, Alex, if you could open that, there was one that you had that you were going on, that one of the bullet points was, well, there's one bullet point about like the errors from DEPI are raised, right? Didn't you write that? Maybe it was in that third.
I from experience of managing a lot of production clusters that have a thing that resolves stuff, I think it is very, very difficult to imagine that the output from DEPI errors will give you enough context to make some decisions about what is or is not causing a resolution failure, right? Especially when semantically you don't know whether that choice of not installing something was a valid one or not, right? The resolver is only going to give you input and output of like what you handed it. So it's like, it's a little bit
So
up
the
to
current,
the client side. Go ahead.
yeah, so the current solver package in OLM does give a lot of really useful information. I think the main issue we've seen is like it's not formatted nicely. So it's really hard to read and can be really, really like scary when somebody sees that barf of resolution stuff. So one of the things that I think some of us have talked a little bit about is potentially having like a pretty print type of thing where somebody can like pass those error messages that already are surfaced through that and see, like, have it be formatted in a slightly more reasonable way to kind of back out like what the issue is. And I'm not sure if that's
So-
like, I'm sure there are other like errors that don't work for that, but some of the ones that just list the conflicts.
So that's fair. I'm trying to identify a specific class of error that I can't imagine a solver package knowing how to negotiate, which is imagine the case where I have provided a cluster constraint, and that cluster constraint is my cluster is version 1.24, and I try to install a package, and I succeed installing that package, and then I try to wait for an upgrade, and that upgrade never happens. And the reason it never happens is because there's a constraint on the next version of the package that is I only install on cube version 1.25 or later, right? Like that's not an error. That's just there's no valid edge to select for. But from the perspective of a user who may not recognize that that's happening on their cluster, they want some kind of output to know, oh, hey, we can't find another version. There's like a lot of iterations of that, of like, well, there's some cluster constraint or there's some dependency constraint that's preventing this version from being a selection that's separate from, we tried to resolve and there was a problem with resolution.
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into this right now. I think the use case is very valid. I think the ability for us to expose, like, these were the things you asked, the constraints you gave us, right, through the operator API, i.e. like the package names in this case. These were the list of all the stuff I had available to install, and this was the result I got. I think making those 3 pieces of information available based on some, resolver ID, I don't even know how you term it, but making it really, really easy for them to provide that, and then that's how we get an issue with the resolution. That's like powerful, right? And I don't think that's necessarily an MVP, but it seems like something we probably want to create, maybe in a part of like Milestone 2. And
I don't know. I kind of feel like I totally agree with Kevin. Like, we need to have that problem solved, but I feel like that's just like no one is asking for that as part of Milestone 1. Right. And like what I imagine is going to happen is that in Milestone 1, the only possible error we'll get from Deppy is I couldn't find that package name. Like that's the only thing that, because we're not going to be looking at dependencies, we're not going to be looking at any other constraints. Like the only error we're going to get is like that package doesn't exist. So I wonder if we can just, I think we somehow need to remember that, like, yeah, we're going to have this problem, but in terms of Milestone 1, I feel like that's just not even close to the scope of what we should try to be solving.
Right. And, again, that I think we can go and create this issue, right? And then this is on the operator controller. And we'll add the labels OLM, B1, M1. And I have no problem going right here and making it clear that we have to give me
see. So I'm gonna push back a little bit here and say that like this, like adding that right now feels like it's premature, because we don't, like, maybe we need to go and make sure our PRD covers what Kevin said, and like only when we get to the point that we know exactly how we're going to solve that problem, or have a pretty good idea about how we're going to solve that problem, we actually go and create the issue for it and say like, okay, now it's something we can work on. I don't know, Kevin, you push back if you disagree, but
I think it's going to be important for us to think about how resolution output is built into our API design, which is why I think talking about that at the very beginning is a valuable exercise. If you feel like we're going to rip out the resolver and do something else with it later anyway, maybe that's fair. But like, I think what I'm getting at kind of comes from some of my concerns I have about the not API implementation of Deppy that we've kind of moved towards. Like, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
So my impression, and Per, correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression was we've got the library bits for Deppy. So the first easiest step to take is like, let's just embed those library bits in the operator controller. But then a second step is going to be that yes, we will go make a resolution controller or whatever we're going to call it, and move all of that logic into its own API. Is that still kind of the plan? Or have I missed
It's definitely an option. So like, just because we're embedding it here now, doesn't mean that that has to be, its final form.
That's fair.
So
I mean, if we're imagining that there could be, another entry point so that I can interrogate the resolver, then I think that what I'm saying is probably just not that important. And as
So
long as
I'll,
we're leaving a path open for that, then I'll take a step back here.
I will heavily +1 Kevin and say that like I think it's probably imperative that we have a way for us to ask the resolver for different resolutions simultaneously. And most likely that means an API to do that, but maybe not. But I feel like the way to answer some of Kevin's questions is for us to make some exploratory resolutions that we don't actually apply to the cluster.
So I think we've landed on this as an MV. This isn't a milestone 1 item. We've identified it that it's something we're going to need to do, and it needs to be tracked somewhere. And yesterday when we were talking with Tony about the scoping initiative and making sure that that's like a good thing, we said it's called out in the PRD and that's sufficient. Is that like the correct place to call this out as well? Just to make sure that requirement isn't lost.
I would be surprised if there's not something in here already that sort of talks about that. Like there's that one.
I just imagine that what's in here is like, make sure all the error messages are good. And I think what's probably lost in translation is the complexity of the problem of, this is not an error message. This is a decision tree that we need to expose to our users.
right, I feel like this whole thing is like a big task in itself. So we have to identify what information we want, when do we want it, how do we want it.
Yeah,
So,
that's
you know what I mean?
And that's totally fair. That's why I said if we think we're going to solve this problem some way other than API design, then I'm happy taking a step back here. And I think we should put it out of scope of the initial deliverable. Like, let's not put this in milestone 1. I'm just saying that's a decision we're making right now. So that, like, let's make sure we're aware of it and we're taking the steps to at least be aware of it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm just going to call out. I'm just going to make a follow-up, like a to-do on the functional requirement to capture this. We need to follow up and make sure that this list captures the need to explain why a certain resolution was met. So like explain properties, sources, constraints. And this is just like a catch-all to make sure that the requirement is captured somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, it seems good.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we follow up on this last item that we talked about at a high level. So the operator controller can take an entity ID and provide it to RecPack. That was the next step once we got the list of entity IDs, right, Joe?
So we're looking up the entity ID to get a bunch of stuff about the entity, and then we're going to take that stuff and provide it to RecPack. So really we're giving RecPack the information it needs based on that ID lookup, which probably is literally just the image.
Do we want to do a time check? Because I think we've crossed.
I'm happy to end. I just wanted to write this one down while Joe's here. And then like this is the high level workflow, and I just want to make sure that it was captured.
I think number 4 and number 3 are probably the same as written. I would probably change number 4 to operator controller can apply and manage RecPack bundle deployments based on the entity ID lookup from 3 or whatever.
Okay.
I think what you, yeah, I think, yeah.
That. And I don't, we can continue to flesh this out and rehash it at the next meeting. So we'll discuss that after we stop recordings. Is there anything anyone wants to add before I stop the recording?
I think there's one more set of work that we didn't talk about, which was just a bunch of plumbing, like CI and image building and make files and tests and all that sort of stuff. But we, we're out of time now, so I just don't want that to get lost. Like that seems like something we should do pretty much immediately.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, again, I think you could, if you can run it locally, that's probably sufficient for a milestone 1, and then you could do another milestone where you actually start doing this stuff the right way. But fair
Yeah, we
enough.
should, like, I'll echo what Joe said. I think we should have to be very careful about the developer flow. Make sure we give all the right tools and it's just easy to do things. Because with legacy OLM, sometimes it can be a little bit painful, especially running end-to-end tests and things like that.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly what my thought was there. Let's treat that. It's almost more important than some of this stuff, because like if we don't get the developer flow right, then adding new features becomes a lot more cumbersome.
But on an optimistic note, I think what Tim did in Ruckpack, the makefile, there hits a lot of, good points. So I think it's definitely something we can build on top of.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, we won't flesh that one out now, but it's a draft. Perfect. So I think that's all we're going to get accomplished today. Everyone, I want to thank you for attending today's meeting. I think it was very productive. And we'll see you at the next one.